And we're live. Hi, everyone. A very good evening, good afternoon, good morning. This is For the Love of Comics with another Sunday live stream. At least I'm hoping we're live. It's been a while since I've done this, so just making sure everything is okay. Great to see people already here. Good to see people watching, waiting for it already. And if you could just let me know in the chat if the audio and the video is coming through fine. Arbaz Khan, good to see you. What's up? Ashwita is in the chat, at least for the time being. So, yes, as we get started, let's do the quick checkup stuff. Let me know where you're watching from if you're watching live. And if you're watching a recording of this later, you can leave that in the comments as well. I always like to start these live streams by saying hello to everyone here and always request people to let us know where they're calling in from, although there are some regulars and I've got them filed away, but it's always good to see people meeting each other. Sajad, good to see you. Colin Taylor, good to see you. Sleepy Reader, great to see you. We've got Sheffield, UK. We've got Oregon. Oh, did I pronounce that funny? Portland, right? Sleepy Reader or around thereabouts. Daniel says everything sounds good. Good to see you. Audio is fine, says Dog did the math. Great, excellent. So this is me just making sure that I'm coming through on both channels. I'm not clipping, etc. It is the middle of the New Delhi summer here, so in spite of the air conditioner, it is quite warm. I'm going to be taking these headphones off. This is just at the beginning. I want to make sure everything is all right and there are no buzzes and clicks. I had some RF interference for those of you interested in the technical stuff earlier, and it took me quite a while to figure out what that was about, but I'm glad to see that things seem to be working fine. I'm also going to see if my editing is up to, because I'm going to be doing a little bit of live camera switching. So ideally, we should have this switch to the up. Oh yeah, there we go. I think that's working. Let me know once again in the chat if it isn't, because every time I switch, I will have to bring the colors back because they're two different cameras with two different color profiles, etc., etc. Aren't you early birds happy that you joined for this technical rambling? But it is the nature of the live stream where things are a little bit more disorganized, a little bit more loosey-goosey and all over the place, especially with the chat and the questions and just the general excitement of being here live. But I also do understand that this makes it quite a lot of faff before we are getting to the meat of the matter, but I should probably lay out an agenda. So in spite of the faff, we know that there's something coming up. So the meat of today's matter, the main course at least, is a box of comics that I came across when I was cleaning up the place. I seem to be spending a lot of time cleaning up the place. Maybe that's a form of procrastination from some other work that I also should be doing. And this box of comics is something I had ordered and had been delivered a long time ago from the US. This is from my comics shop, Lone Star Comics, probably the biggest online retailer of comics. And I used to buy from Lone Star Comics a lot, but since the shipping charges have increased in the last few years, my ordering has gotten rarer and rarer. However, there are times in which I've succumbed to temptation or something has come up on, a wish list, and then I try to get as much as I can within the $20-25 shipping thing. And this must have been one of those boxes, but either I purchased it right when we were moving or a lot of stuff was going on. And once again, a lot of stuff always seems to be going on. And I have a tendency, if I receive a package, I have a tendency to keep it packed until I know I can open it and put it on the shelves properly. Because if I get it unpacked, then not only do I have loose books lying around, but if they don't have a dedicated space yet, I might end up misfiling them or miscategorizing them. So I have this care that I take that as long as it stays in the box, it's not being damaged and it's not being misfiled. But this is the first time that I had completely forgotten about something I had ordered. And that made me want to chat about it live with all of you. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at. Of course, that was only an excuse for me to also take a couple of other packages that I've received more recently than this one that I had forgotten everything about. A couple of other packages that I haven't gotten to opening, but I was aware of them. You know, I knew that they were there, or I had opened them but put them back in the envelope because I didn't have a place for them, or I wanted to talk about them on a live stream or a video. So I've tacked on a couple of extras to that, which we'll probably start with and then work our way up to seeing what is in this box. Because honestly, it's been so long that I've sort of forgotten what's in the package, and I'm not really sure why that would be the case, which is anyway, we'll get to it. So first of all, that's the broader context for what's coming up. But before that, let me say hello to everyone in the chat. Good to know that the audio video is working. Riwanji, good to see you. Anurag, good to see you from Maharashtra, India. New Jersey, USA, Arbaz Khan, the heart of Portland. Thanks, Sleepy, for confirming that. Greetings from Portugal, says Riwanji. The Switch looked good to Colin Taylor. For a second there, Colin, I thought you were talking about the Nintendo Switch. And I was like, that's the wrong stream, man. But I realize now you're talking about the camera. But I do think that came up on my phone news things, the Switch 2 release. So my brain must be over there. Comics Fan 1973, good to see you. Tommy, good to see you. Long time no see, Tommy. Comic Crack, very good to see you. Afternoon. Is Lone Star still active online, Anurag? Good question. And I'm thrilled to have in the chat Comic Crack, who recently, I think it was maybe last week, Comic Crack let us know in the chat if that's wrong, recently had a short out which was showing a shipment of comics from Lone Star Comics, from mycomicshop.com, if I'm not mistaken. I remember watching that because that was quite a haul. There was a number of goodies in there, including that second volume of Domu, which I have been looking for over a decade. I have the first volume, but I've never been able to find the second volume. So I was very thrilled to see that, you know, it's not a legendary thing and it does actually exist. But of course, I saw that there was a Frank comic in there, and the first volume of Domu as well. But yes, Lone Star is very much active online. I think they're just getting bigger and bigger as it goes on. My ordering from Lone Star Comics has taken a hit, no fault of theirs. They've got an excellent collection. They've got a very good website that's easy to navigate. They've got a nice, fun reminder system. It's just shipping charges and costs, as well as some of the other logistical issues over there. Comics Fan says no more red microphone. I'm actually trying out a couple of, you know, I go back and forth. The red microphone had come out for the first time, I think, over here. I'd used it once before when I was traveling. This is my regular mic, but yeah, I'll bring the red microphone back, which is, I think, I mean, for those of you who are interested in microphones and things like that, I think I'll put something on my, because I had said on my Patreon that I'll do behind the scenes stuff, not because everyone is not interested necessarily in this, but that microphone for about $80-$90, I think I bought it, is a surprisingly good microphone. I really like that. So I'll definitely look at using that more. And it works really well in the summer because not only do the machines around me make a lot of noise, but the air conditioner makes a lot of noise. So condenser microphone, forget about it. You have to use a dynamic mic, and that as a dynamic mic has a very good thing, as does this one. But yes, maybe I'll switch back and forth. Nicola, good to see you. Hi from Serbia. I don't know what Comic Crack is saying that's true for, but maybe he's agreeing with me because I was probably right. And Colin Taylor did actually get his hands on the Switch too. Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to take these headphones off now, so I will no longer be monitoring my audio. I will look to all of you to say if anything goes wrong, if the audio suddenly fluctuates or if you get a buzzing sound. That's what I'm really worried about. If any kind of cable moves and you get that, but just let me know in the chat. I'll put my headphones on and do it. But otherwise, that's much better. And also, I'm less muffled, so maybe I was shouting earlier, and I won't have that be Arindam, good to see you. And this one works fine. Yeah, I like microphones and I like playing around with microphones. So I like to keep changing things up. So good to see everyone. Let's see. Was there anything else I needed to mention before we dived right in? Let me check all of my technical stuff. I've got my audio meter up. I've got this thing on a backup battery. All right, everything looks pretty good. Great to see everyone here. If you're one of those people who just like to watch and don't care about chatting, that's completely fine. But I would request this right now, and I'll bring this up again later. I've noticed that my live streams get a great amount of chat while they're live, but later their recordings, obviously fewer people watch the recordings of live streams. In fact, whenever I have people watching recordings later and saying that they enjoyed them, I'm really flattered, because I wonder if something that is so loose would have any allure later on without the live chat and without that interactivity. But also, I really appreciate people writing comments and hitting like, because the likes and the comments are drastically lower for live streams, even though the watch time and other metrics, things like that, because they're longer, other numbers look good. Even views look pretty good, but not as good as some videos, but better than some other videos. So I'm not worried. But it's so funny that the comments and the like numbers are usually like a third of what they would be for a recorded video for the same number of views. And I wonder if this is because when watching a live stream, many people watch it in 2 or 3 parts later as a recording, or even people who are watching it live may drop off after a while, especially for one of my marathon sessions. There are live streams on this channel that have gone for 4 hours, although not that many, but 2.5 to 3 hours is a regular thing. And a hour to an hour and a half is what I would consider a breeze of a live stream. So given the length of these, it's understandable that people would watch them in installments, but then it's almost like when you watch for a long time or you watch in multiple installments, you don't have an immediate reaction like hitting the like or leaving a comment just because you're going to come back to it and you'll take care of it some other time or something like that. I'm not sure what that is, but as an experiment, if you who are watching right now and if you who are watching later as a recording haven't hit the like button, could you please hit the like button? Because I want to see if it makes a difference, if me saying that actually makes a statistical difference. And I believe I've got a decent enough sample size to see if that, to take a learning from it. Lone Star is still going strong, says Comic Crack. Yeah, and it's true that I did see all 3 volumes of Domu, and it was all worth the wait. All right, so that gives me hope that I will find those other volumes as well, volume 2 in particular, because I think volume 3 is something I have run across before, and I always got the feeling that, or maybe it's not available anymore, but I didn't want to buy 3 without having 2 in my hand. All right, excellent. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Now let's get started. As I was saying earlier, this box over here, which is slightly off frame, just outside the frame, but it is over here. This box of comics is it's bolstered, or it's there are some bonus comics in here, and the first package is also from the United States, but from a long-time viewer of this channel, a long-time supporter, commenter, Steve H. I didn't get his permission, from Michigan. And Steve had chatted with me, has on a number of occasions chatted with me, and in the comments and over messages and email. And he asked me for my address because he said he wanted to send me a couple of things that he was going to. I don't remember now, because I think this was some time ago, definitely 3 or 4 months ago, if not longer ago. Either there were doubles or things that he had found and thought I would enjoy, and I really should have gotten myself a device for I'm sorry about the sound, but maybe that's the ASMR of of this unboxing. There's just tape around the cardboard that I'm trying to get rid of. But anyway, Steve had asked me for my address because he wanted to send me a couple of things that he had found, and this is what he has sent me. I had opened that package, so I could tell from the spines what these two books were, but obviously I haven't opened them yet because you know what? I'm gonna have to improvise. All right, well, this is ridiculous. I did not think that this tape was going to be so tough. The hardcore commenters, Sleepy Reader says, maybe more likely to be in the live stream. That's true. That's true. That is what I found very interesting uh, about this small little channel is even people commenting for the first time, or either they are viewers for a long time but only commenting for the first time. But even people who are first time viewers and commenting seem to be encouraged to be garrulous. Maybe there's something in the water, or maybe they just find it to be a space in which they see this guy is talking a lot, I can talk a lot as well. So I think the frequency of commentary, yes, that I believe there are hardcore viewers and people who, you know, just like I watch people's channels, there are people who watch this channel regularly and will comment and are that's how I know that they're long time viewers. I know they're long time supporters and fans, and so many of you are patrons or YouTube members. But there is this comfort in talking a lot, not the frequent of the number of comments on videos, but writing lengthy comments or writing lengthy. What I particularly enjoy is the fact that everyone reminisces on this channel, because I often think about, you know, when you talk about comics, when you talk about anything, but when you talk about comics in particular, very often you're talking about yourself. You're talking almost partially autobiographically a lot. Of course, because opinion is autobiography. It's like what I feel and how I feel. But there's also a very different reason everyone has for liking something. And so many of those things have to do with when I first read it, or how I first encountered it, or the way I felt over the years. So sharing those kind of stories has been something that I've been very happy to see people do uh, with ease over here. So it makes me feel good about this channel, as in this is a place that um, yeah, sorry, I got distracted by Tommy's very funny comment about underestimating tape. I feel like maybe Ashwita is no longer watching this, but if she was, I could ask her to grab me a pair of scissors, although I would have had. Now you're going to see the total. This is how am I supposed to get more people to watch recordings of things if they are this unprofessional? That is like, hey everyone, let's join for a Sunday unboxing. Oh dear, I'm foiled at my very first attempt. It's actually, I mean, I could just stare at it, but I'm worried, of course, about damaging the comics inside. So, Paolo Costa, good to see you. Tommy, Nicholas Smart, hello from the RSA. I'm going to run out, and all of you are going to look at an empty live stream. There's a first time for everything. So this is the first time that I believe that I'm just going to leave you to stare at the rest of this room while I go and grab something to help me remove this tape. Well, that wasn't too bad. I grabbed something from the refrigerator. The ease of this is now is great. I'm hoping that we can. That's all it took, really. Just one little. Oh no, I spoke too soon. I've got a few more slices to make, but at least it's progressing, and silently, I may add. But yes, of course, the worry is I don't want to nick the books underneath the tape, even though there's a thing of plastic right here. Luckily, this is packed by someone who knows to put that extra bit of cardboard around. So I've got a little bit of give, but still just just to be on the safer side. There we go. Excellent. All right. So now we've got two volumes over here. The first one is this thin, what I can tell is a trade paperback. All right. It's got its individual plastic tape on this side as well. But it's what prevents the books from getting damaged in transit. And as anyone who has received damaged books in transit will tell you, well, a little bit more care is better than less care. So particularly when people talk about the way that Amazon delivers books, you think that a company that became famous as a bookseller would be better at packaging books, but it seems to be an almost international, universal experience. It's not just Amazon in the US, it's in India and anywhere else that you have Amazon. You have people complaining about the level of packaging, of where it's just thrown into a brown paper envelope and sent with all the corners dinged and tears and things like that. That's how the book arrives. This, luckily, is not that case. The first book over here is Usagi Yojimbo Tribute. This is celebrating 40 years of Usagi Yojimbo. I have a little external button for focus. There we go. That works as well. This is for Usagi fans, by Usagi fans. I believe I know Steve from Facebook, where the Usagi Yojimbo Dojo is a huge group of the most knowledgeable and loving fans of Usagi Yojimbo you will ever see. And this is an anthology. I don't know how much of this table of contents will be readable. There we go. So this is an anthology of Usagi stories, not by Stan Sakai. So let's see. We've got Chuck Dillon, David S. Livins, Matt Nelson. I'm not very familiar with many of these names, I would say, but I'll have to take a look, because I've probably known about this, because this celebrating 40 years for Usagi by Usagi fans seems very familiar to me. I believe that these are all fan comics, maybe by members of that group itself, the Usagi Yojimbo Dojo. I could be wrong, but if anyone knows, once again, leave it in the chat or in the comments. A wide variety of art styles, and not just stories, but what looks to be pin-ups and posters. Going in different formats as well. It's very cool, very fun. Obviously, because of my widely professed love for Usagi Yojimbo, we've got this this wonderful gift, and I can see in the back some more familiar names. Obviously, David Peterson of Mouse Guard. So the pinup contributions, but of course, you can't take my knowledge of names to be any indicator. But Jared Cullum, I'm aware of, and I've seen a lot of variant. You know what? I could now maybe try this to see if that's a little on the dark side. There we go. So here we have Dan Watts and Jared Cullum pinups, and of course we already saw the David Peterson one back here. This is Danny Segura, but these are these are at the end. What we've got over here are what look like short stories set in the Usagi Yojimbo world, and most of the time, it seems to me, from my very quick flip through right now in front of you, most of them starring Miyamoto Usagi and friends, done in, I can see different styles, but also different tones, and this looks like something really interesting, and I'm looking forward to sinking my teeth into it. So that's the Usagi Yojimbo tribute, celebrating 40 years. It just says Usagi Yojimbo Dojo on the spine, so it must be essentially a fan published project. This is not from Dark Horse or IDW or anything like that. And this is must be from, well, there you go, Steve Hubble. That's so much for me. He is the brains behind this anthology, and he's put this anthology together and sent this to me due to my love for the series. So thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry that it's taken me so long to get to it, but it's also because I didn't want it to get damaged and all of that stuff. But not content with that, there is a second book in this package that Steve has sent me, which is not just the Usagi book. And this one too, I can tell from the spine what it is. And I'm very excited because this is a comic that I have never actually seen myself, although I have read the comic. What I mean by that is this is a Lone Wolf and Cub trade paperback from First Comics, from First Publishing. Now, First Publishing reprinted, I think it was 44 issues of Lone Wolf and Cub. Change it back. Change the color. There we go. So this is First Comics published them in this full American comic book size. This was also westernized to go from left to right and have the spine on the left side. But this was before the tankobon-sized volumes brought out by Dark Horse. They'd never completed the series. They did 44 of these issues. And I do have a handful of these issues, but I've never, ever seen one of these trade paperbacks. It's got a dust jacket, wow, on a paper. I thought it was loose and I was being delicate, but it's actually a dust jacket on a trade paperback with printing on the front and back covers. Ooh, the back cover seems to be a negative version of the front cover, but that's not the real front cover. That's the sort of inside the dust jacket. The dust jacket is the one that has the painted cover as well as all of the typography. That's such a beautiful artifact. And this is, of course, the largest size other than the gallery edition that I have ever read, Lone Wolf and Cub. There's some similarities there, of course. But Lone Wolf and Cub at this size is a pleasure to read. You get this different kind of feel to the brushstrokes. And that's why even when the omnibuses from Dark Horse became larger, I was happy about it, even though some bemoaned the loss of the charm of the smaller volumes. And over here at this larger size, having all of these stories in the first trade paperback, which I'm guessing would be, given its thickness, maybe 6 issues. Maybe it says somewhere early. Yeah, 6 issues. So the Assassin's Road, The Coming of the Cold, Pitiful Osu, The Flute of the Fallen Tiger, Headless Sakon, and The White Way Between Two Rivers are collected in this trade paperback. So I wonder how many of these trade paperbacks First Comics did. I've loved having those occasional singles of Lone Wolf and Cub First Comics. And I saw some people in the chat earlier who I know also collect or have been collecting the First Comics Lone Wolf and Cub issues. I wonder if these trade paperbacks are hard to get. I would believe they would be, but that's just lovely. And how wonderful. Thank you so much, Steve, not just for the Usagi, but for the other samurai story that you've sent over here. This is, oh yeah, I gotta change the colors again because of that switch. But these are the first 2 of the unboxings for this evening. Lone Wolf and Cub from First Publishing, and the Usagi Yojimbo tribute from the Usagi Yojimbo dojo. If you are on Facebook, check that group out if you're not already a member of that. All right, let me just quickly check in with the chat before moving on to the next books. Thank you, everyone, for your patience as I found a way to cut through the tape. Different tribute book, just pin-ups, and this is new to me, says Sleepy Reader, about the Usagi Yojimbo. Yes, I think that the one you're talking about, Sleepy Reader, might be the official tribute book, I think, brought out by Dark Horse, in which they commissioned or, got all of these professional comic books writers and artists to contribute. This seems to be more of a readers or fans, or maybe lesser known but independently self-published comics creators. I'm not sure. The pinups obviously over here, I as I said, I recognize some names, but I think this is slightly different because it's from the Usagi Yojimbo dojo. I feel and some ancient cobwebs are being cleared somewhere. I feel that this might be something Steve told me was created by the members of the fan club, by members of the Stan Sakai fan club, which is, I think, a fantastic venture. Colin Taylor says there's a fantastic Usagi Yojimbo Humble Bundle at the moment. Is the Humble Bundle, I'm guessing, would be a digital pack. So unless there is Humble Bundles for physical items as well, which I've never heard of, but which would be, then I'd be interested. But if it's a digital pack and there are people who like reading digitally, check that out. Sunflower says, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'll be reading a bunch of graphic novels today. That's the best way to spend a Sunday. The French got a recent deluxe edition of Lone Wolf and Cub, says Shrelp. Hi, Shrelp. Good to see you. And I wish Dark Horse would release them, but they reprinted the Omnis instead. I know the clamor for Dark Horse to release like they've done with Berserk, but also a number of other manga, release a hardcover deluxe edition of Lone Wolf and Cub is quite a enthusiastic clamor. I wonder what it is that Dark Horse sees. I mean, maybe the numbers they sell in the paperbacks are so high that they don't think that the hardcover will. I'm not sure what the logic is, or maybe it's just finding a spot. But I agree with most of you, including you, Shrelp, that seems like a no-brainer. It seems like of all of the series that you have the rights to publish, and you are putting out these hardcover deluxe editions, Lone Wolf and Cub would be the one. Although somewhere I'm glad, in a way, that they're not doing that, because I would be so sorely tempted, and it was only recently that I would have finished finally getting my hands on all 12 of those volumes. I think a couple of them were out of print, and it's the recent reprints that helped me finish them. And of course, I was going to finish the 12 volumes. So having spent that amount of money, energy, and time, I don't know if I don't know if I have it in me to go after a deluxe hardcover. So I'm in that sort of way. I'm glad that that option doesn't exist for me yet. Okay, so moving on from this lovely gift and presents, I have over here another comic, and this is another package that was sent to me. And this was sent to me from a publisher, the publisher being Titan Comics. Titan Comics have sent me a couple of comics before, and in the previous instances, I knew it was coming, but in this case, either they decided to give me a surprise or my memory has gotten really bad, which I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. As you could see, I was fumbling and stumbling through my vague recollections of Steve's conversation about the Usagi Yojimbo collection. But this is the collected John Law, Will Eisner, and Gary Challoner. And I not only had no idea that this was on its way to me, I had no idea about John Law. I have no idea about this character. Apparently, he is a character very similar to another Will Eisner crime fighter. But I hadn't ever heard of John Law, and I think that's kind of the point of this edition. There is a foreword here by Dennis Kitchen, who was not just Will Eisner's publisher at Kitchen Sink Press, but also his agent, something I didn't know until I read this book. But I haven't actually read this whole book. I've only read the first couple of stories because there were only 3 John Law stories written and drawn by Will Eisner published. There were to be more stories, but because of the failure or the yes, I guess the comics that Will Eisner was trying to publish at that time not being successful, those comics got cancelled, and this one was being anthologized, or it was part of one comic that got cancelled. However, there were 3 stories that Will Eisner had already done, almost completed or had completed, that because of the comic's cancellation, he then repurposed into being spirit stories. So the parts of this that I have read are those original 3 stories written by Will Eisner that he did publish, and then some of this extra material telling of how this story got repurposed, and all these stories got repurposed. So this wasn't a predecessor to the Spirit. It's the Spirit started some years before this, but this was among the variety of comics that Will Eisner was trying to publish. He was trying to publish sports stories, baseball, and romance stories. He was trying to publish everything, and part of that was another crime series after the Spirit had started, which could have been maybe more successful if he had stuck with it. But you know, he was a businessman as well as these articles over here. So there are 3 stories, and then it was revived in the 1990s, and then there are later stories, and that's where Gary Challoner comes in, who was a fan of the original stories and he started doing them while Will Eisner was still alive. And so he had Will Eisner's blessings and Will Eisner's looking over his work on his revival, which are the stories that I have not yet read. And you can see that they look more modern, but they also are heavily influenced by Will Eisner's style and layouts, which you can see also in the original Eisner stories over here. So this is a book that I recently discovered, as in not just that this book exists, but the character that this book is about exists. And this is a terrific, I think, slim little volume, because it's got 3 very short stories and then a handful of other short stories. And then it's got all this archival material and these essays. So there is not only a couple of forewords, but also an afterword by Gary Challoner that's terrific reading. And for Will Eisner fans or scholars, completionists, I think this is a terrific comic as far as seeing where, spirit stories that you might be familiar with are 3 of them, as I said, 3 of those spirit stories, where they started and where they came from. From what I saw of the earlier stories, they don't have the same brilliance as the spirit stories do, especially the post-war spirit stories. But these are a little earlier than that, I think. So that's to be expected, but they are pretty good. They are better, I think, than what the spirit stories ended up becoming towards the end of their run. And I'm looking forward to reading the sort of rebooted version. So from Titan Comics by Will Eisner and Gary Challoner, this is John Law. All right, moving right along. Eclipse of Kitchen Sink did a John Law floppy back in the day. I think there are a couple of editions, Comic Crack, that are mentioned in those articles over there. I think they talk about how many times it's been revived or in which form it might have been revived. And of course, reprints, just the way that you had with Spirit, might have been. But it's I think, I'm not sure, there is a... Yes, there is a remastering that's been done over here. I'm not quite sure what they mean by the remastering, but just given what I've seen of Will Eisner stuff from 1940, I'm guessing that it might have a little to do with the way the blacks or the grays are over here. I have to say I'm not always a fan of these gradients in gray or gradients in colors. There's something about them sometimes that appear a little too computerized for me, but there's just a glossiness to this, I think, that really works for the sort of two-fisted pulp storytelling that this has. Yeah, the newer stories, obviously, you can see that sort of 90s influence, although they are also in black and white, which I think is an interesting choice over here. I'm not sure if they were always in black and white or they're being reproduced. I don't know why they would be reproduced in black and white. I think they must have been a black and white comic. But yeah, I found that interesting. And it's definitely interesting for people interested in the spirit or in Will Eisner. Yes, so Sleepy Reader says he was shocked that it was basis for one of the most famous spirit stories. That is the three stories of John Law that were not used. Two of them were ones in which he introduced the character of Sans Serif. And Sans Serif obviously became one of the most notable spirit femme fatales. And you can read the Sans Serif stories, even if you don't have the spirit archives. You can read it in the Femme Fatales collection or the best of or the best of the spirit collection. I've got a couple of spirit videos, including spirit by other creators other than Will Eisner. So over there, it's interesting to me as well to see that that's where she originated in stories that were written for a different character. The John Law comics are interested. Yes, there you go. Colin is already talked about the sans serif story. Now, talking about Eclipse and Kitchen Sink, and before that, we were talking about First Comics in the reprints of Lone Wolf and Cub. These are classic American comics publishers, and maybe because of my nostalgia and the kind of comics that I've discovered, not just in my childhood, the occasional ones that I would come across, but in the years since then as well, there is a attachment I have to these, and the fact that so many of them folded and went away is really like to me it's it's one of those kind of nostalgia for a time that you never actually knew or lived through. It's one of those things where I can see I'm glad that Fantagraphics is still around, but there were so many of these small publishers that either went broke or got bought, I think probably absorbed into one of the bigger companies. And reading about them and reading about their stories and what happened to characters or stories that they published, if like where the rights went to and who continued publishing them, these things are very interesting to look at as well. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because in putting these packages together and saying, okay, here are a couple more. I mean, there's the package I'd completely forgotten about, but after pulling a couple of these things out where I'd taken them out before but put them back in, etc., I also found these two comics that I had ordered from my comics shop at some point of time, and they must have come with some other package with some other comics, and I'd put the other comics away because I either read them or I knew where they went. And these two, I couldn't figure out why I had ordered them. This is number 2 and number 3 of Kong the Untamed, from the primitive world of Kong the Untamed, the line of DC superstars. And I was really confused because I couldn't for the life of me recall why I would have gotten these comics. And then I opened them and I realized, looking at the credits, the editor is Joe Orlando. The writer is Jack Olek. So Joe Orlando I've heard of. Jack Olek I've never heard of. But the artist is Alfredo Alcala. And then it clicked, is I must have been looking for anything by Alcala, an artist that I really admire and have talked about most in detail, I think, in my live stream on the Classics Illustrated, where Nestor Redondo and Alex Nino and Alfredo Alcala were the three Filipino artists whose work stood out to me in in comics that otherwise might not have really lasted in my memory. Three Musketeers adaptation, or an adaptation of Robert Louis Stevenson's Kidnapped, for example. But that artwork, maybe because I saw it as a kid, but it really seared itself into my brain. And just recently, I had a comment on my top 10 fantasy comics video, in which I make honorable mention of the He-Man mini comics volume. And I say, all right, they're horrible comics, but because of this, that, and the other, I give this little story of why they mean so much to me, something I've come back to in a couple of other videos. But someone said, hey, don't diss those He-Man mini comics too much. Alcala drew them. And I was like, you're right. I remember that there are some of those He-Man mini comics as well that were much better than they deserve to be because of the artwork. I think I actually know someone who may own some Alfredo Alcala art from one of those He-Man mini comics, maybe the one with Ram Man, if I'm remembering correctly. But yes, so I do not, and I really like his artwork, and I must have, in my research, I must have found that he was the artist for Kong the Untamed, and found a couple of these issues and thrown them onto an order. Looking through these, I can definitely see what that the great artist that I loved, but I have to say there are times, looking through this just very, very briefly right now, the coloring and the printing, and maybe this is more early art, but there's something about it that isn't quite as striking as the black and white art and on the line work that I remember. But of course, that's only certain panels. Certain other panels, it's very impressive. But I can tell, I think, that the colors are doing a little bit of a disservice over here to the line work underneath it. And the reproduction itself is not that great. However, it's very cool to me in my little way of completing or not completing, but throwing things together in bits and pieces, that I have a couple more examples of the art of this artist whose work I've, as I said, in the He-Man mini comics and in the Classics Illustrated books, enjoyed so much. And let's go back to the comments. We've got Paulo Costa says Jack Olek is one of those writers from the late 50s who never transitioned to superheroes. Marvel Atlas writer Carl Wessler, like him, he sought refuge elsewhere after Atlas. Excellent. I mean, I know a little bit about that period, but not that much, So therefore, the idea that he is, if this is the line of DC superstars, he is still writing comics at this point, and this would be 1975, but just not superhero comics. He's writing Kong the Untamed, unless this is a reprint of some sorts. If you're saying this is older, but that seems to line up with when I thought Alfredo Alcala was drawing in the United States. For the Classics Illustrated. I keep saying Classics Illustrated because I've grouped them all together, but I believe the particular ones I'm talking about are Pendulum Press comics. The Pendulum Press literary adaptations. Those were the ones. Sunflower says, good afternoon. My name is Anshuman. Good to meet you. Yes, for those of you who are tuning in for the first or for a time in which you don't know, I think you might have seen it mentioned in the chat anyway, but my name is Anshuman. It used to be a secret, but no longer. It was never a secret. But for many years, I never revealed my name. In fact, I once was trying to quiz somebody of like, can you tell me which video of mine is the first in which I give my name, in which I name myself. It's a very obscure piece of trivia. I'd be interested in seeing if anyone here in the chat would be able to say. It's probably not one of the ones you're thinking about, but if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. But best in black and white mags, says Sleepy Reader about Alcala. Yes, I absolutely agree. The black and white stuff in Pendulum Press comics, it's amazing. It's astonishing. And again, it might be because of my, when I read it, but those comics, and watch that live stream because I show those comics, and unfortunately I don't have. I would have pulled them up. I mean, there's and Alex Nino was the same way, and as was who was the third person I mentioned? But it was like, the barrels that they drew, the wine bottles that they drew, the port wine and the bulbous nature of that glass, the sausages, hanging from the pantry, these details along the gloves being pulled tight on a hand. These are fantastic. And I don't believe at that time, reading a lot of cheaper and not very well drawn comics, I hadn't seen that kind of, it almost didn't seem like it could be drawn. It was so perfect, and at the same time, what else could it be? Because of course it wasn't a photograph. So when I think about the love that I have for comics and for comics art, that is a very big part of it. That kind of fascination is very similar to that fascination I had with Tintin and Hergé and Asterix. It's like, look at that. That's drawing, but I don't know how is it drawing? How is it so good? How is it so evocative? And that's the kind of thing that I can draw a straight line from that to things like Chris Ware, where I look at the page and I say, how is it possible? How can this be drawn? But it is drawn. Kong was new, Paolo says. All right, so no reprint. So there you go. So that's DC, but from 1975, Alfredo Alcala. I do wish they were a little better produced, or at the very least, I wish these were black and white comics. But I can completely get why. But that's the sort of thing I don't really miss. I know there's a lot of rosy tinted glasses stuff, but I don't really miss the bad comics, as in the comics that made something look bad. And in India, we had a lot of comics that I always thought were being redrawn over here, or maybe they tried to reproduce it or they tried to copy it. And this is back in, the 80s. I don't know what their form of copying was, but then someone here would sort of fill in the mouth or fill in the eyes because it got blotted out. So a lot of the Tarzan or Korak comics I read, you would occasionally come across a panel that just looked like a child had drawn it because something was done afterwards. So the bad reproduction, the bad color separation, the muddying and of line work, and the murkiness of blacks, sort of making everything into one hodgepodge of brown and gray almost, is not something that I miss. I really do like being able to see, and I love to see that. That's why art books, even though I'm not a big fan of, or I don't want to open up another can of worms and collect art books. That's why the gallery editions, etc., have that allure, because sometimes they'll show you that line work and show you that art in a way that even the comics, because of the necessity of mass reproduction, would have obscured it. But yes, so that was Kong. That was one of the comics that I had gotten, and then it's related to this package in that way, is that I couldn't remember why I had gotten this. I don't know, what is Kong the Untamed and why did I pick that up? Now we finally get to what I got from my comics shop. And I obviously had taken it out of the box and there was a list, but then I haven't looked at that list purposely so that we can open this and take a look at it together. I do see a spine. So one of them has been given away, but before we get to this one, the other thing, and this is probably what I was actually getting from my comics shop, and then I threw on some other things, is this. And this one, obviously, I could see what this is. This is the original Nexus hardcover. This is issues 1, 2, and 3. The first black and white miniseries by Steve Rude and Mike Barron. Mike Barron is the creator. Steve Rude is the co-creator. But from what I remember first when I was reading about it, is like Mike Barron was even responsible for the visual look of him. He had the hero, like he came up with the hero completely almost. And Steve Rude's artwork just made it come alive in a way. This is a hardcover that we'll look at over here, but this hardcover is something I remember I found Nexus, and I've heard about Nexus a lot. I've heard about it as one of the best comics that no one ever talks about, and that kind of stuff always intrigues me. At the same time, it is a superhero comic from the 1980s, from really early, from like 1980 or 1981. And it's an independent comic. It's not from Marvel or DC. So I had my doubts. I was like, okay, but the more I heard about it, the more I was intrigued. But some years ago, and I believe there's a live stream about that as well, I went to a comic sale here in Delhi, a physical comic sale that was taking place across town, and it was just American comics, magazines, and singles mainly, but also trade paperbacks, and most of them used. I mean, all of them used, in fact, so it's back issues. And it's a company that imports all of these things and they sell online. And a lot of people in India buy from Worthing. But Worthing, whose website most people buy their singles and magazines and back issues of American comics from, also has these sort of physical sales. And this one, when I attended, I found a number of comics from not just Image. They had a lot of Image comics, but I found a number of comics that were these Eclipse and Comico and First Comics, these older, now defunct publishers. I don't remember if there was any Kitchen Sink Press comics there, but in that live stream, I was kind of talking about like, how wonderful is this? And then a lot of these people who I see over here, Sleepy Reader, Comic Crack, also Paolo, maybe, I believe you were on that. And again, people were talking about these companies. And that's where I had first picked up Nexus. And there were some questions about, had I picked up the second volume or the first stories, did I pick it up, etc. And people were looking it up, which I love people doing, as we are having these live streams. So people were looking it up, and there I had picked up what was essentially, what I realize now, were 2 volumes that covered the first 6 stories, the first 3 first miniseries. The second miniseries was also 3 issues, but it wasn't Steve Rude drawing it, or from number 7 onwards, it wasn't Steve Rude drawing it, but it was great and it was fantastic. Now, of course, it had many more issues after that. And I think what happened is, at that time, I went looking for more Nexus, and I was trying to see if I could find on eBay or on my comics shop, if I could find any cheap singles that I could pick up. And that's when I found this hardcover, because this was, it was on sale, but it was not, it wasn't First Comics. It wasn't even Capital Comics. It was Graffiti Designs. And it was a hardcover limited editions, I think they said. So I believe I was freshly seduced by this comic series that turned out to be much fresher and more, much more interesting than I was worried that it would be. And I think it must have been a sort of impulse purchase, because even with the discount, this was, it was more than $20. I'll tell you that. This original Nexus is a Graffiti Designs signed limited edition. So it says number 302 of 1000 in the limited hardcover original Nexus graphic novel, Mike Barron and Steve Rude, although that just looks like initials. But this Graffiti Designs is a publisher whose work I have really admired. I love their archiving. I love their special editions that they bring out. Some of them have some complaints from people, but I suppose I couldn't let this go because now, of course, this was, as I was saying, it's been a long time since I bought this box, and I wouldn't say I'd forgotten that I'd purchased this, but I had to be reminded. Let's just put it that way. But I just loved Steve Rude's art in this. I've not read anything else by Steve Rude, drawn by Steve Rude. In fact, I haven't read anything written by Mike Barron. And I think the writing over here is interesting, and it's dark, and it's, I wouldn't call it gritty, because it's very much like, it borrows or pays tribute to pulp fiction, pulp sci-fi wonderfully, not in a grim dark sort of way, but it is more adult, more grown up. It has more violence and more dark themes than I would have expected. And of course, this is 1980 and 1981, so this is many years before whichever books people feel in 86 or 87 changed comics, etc. And this is not from Marvel and DC. As I said, I think it was the first mini series, or the first series of 3 issues, was published by Capital, and then it moved to First, so not one of the big 2. And it was cool. It's still cool till today. So I think when I saw that there was a limited edition hardcover that's signed by the authors up for grabs, I sort of jumped at it. And I haven't read more than the first 7 or 8 issues of Nexus. I think I read somewhere in the next Nexus or something like that. There was another trade paperback I picked up, which I showed in that live stream. But I love the start of it, and I know that it's supposed to get really good the more you read it. But I thought it was a good rollicking start, and I just looking through this book right now, looking through the quality of the paper and the reproduction, I think it looks beautiful. It reminds me a little bit of the Halo Jones hardcover. Obviously, the art is quite different, but there's something about the page layouts that I think are surprisingly not dated. I would say this is, and I really like that clean art style of Steve Rude's. I think I've seen commissions and other artwork like Comic Con sketches by Steve Rude. I've not read any comics of his, but I know I have some friends again who have commissions and who have artwork they own from Steve Rude, and I've often thought he reminds me of Darwin Cook or Stuart Immonen, people who are very good with few lines and have that sort of classic retro look. You can see that he's quite influenced by Alex Toth, I think, is the one that comes up, and it's funny because I think Steve Rude also did a Space Ghost comic for Comic Co. From what I remember, and you can definitely see Space Ghost as an influence over here as well. But of course, you could say Flash Gordon, you could say Star Trek. There's a lot of very cool stuff here, and I think the world, or the universe really, the sci-fi universe that Mike Baron and Steve Rude create in this book is what really grabbed me. It seemed very full and very rich. So that's the limited edition of Nexus. All right, back to the A-cam and A-cam color. Back to the comments. Definitely more sci-fi than superhero. Yes, exactly. I must have had my quotation marks on the wrong camera. Yes, it's not so much a superhero story as it is sci-fi, but of course there's flying around and there's shooting, force power beams and things like that. But there's a lot more about the sci-fi concepts and the pulpy storytelling, which I have to say I was a little worried about, because sometimes people's praise maybe because of their nostalgia, and if you don't share that nostalgia, although I'm saying this, sometimes I can have nostalgia for things I never knew, but I can certainly manufacture nostalgia, but that is sometimes a worry. And there's definitely been classic old stuff or more culty stuff that hasn't appealed to me, and I've understood why some people have a thing for it, but I may not share that. That's kind of what I was worried about when I first heard about Nexus, a 1981 black and white comic. But it's very good, I have to say. I mean, I am probably not getting some of the references here because it does seem to be quite dense, and I believe that once again, now I'm trying to think about, because when I read those first Nexus stories and I was looking this up, I was doing a little bit of reading up on it as well. But there's in later issues, maybe there's all kinds of Easter eggs and references before these things were the norm, or before, it was sort of expected from things of Hanna-Barbera and pop cultural sci-fi references being woven into the artwork and into the background and stuff like that. So it's definitely fun, but it's also dark. It has a lot of violence and it has a lot of death and a lot of killing in it, which surprised me. Tommy needs to drop. Tommy, we'll catch you later. Paolo says it's science fiction, family, drama, humor, political thriller, and psychological exploration all in one. Absolutely. I mean, I definitely got the sense of that density. I think the more I read it, the more some of these things will come through. But the science fiction and the drama, the humor of it is, I think, there from the very beginning. Mike Barron had a long run with the Punisher at Marvel and the Flash at DC, Paolo says, in late 80s, early 90s. All right. I think the name sounds kind of familiar to me, but maybe only from the point of view of Nexus. But Nexus is a good one, I mean, like, it's definitely I'll read more Nexus first, and then I will take that as encouragement to read more Mike Barron. I am definitely going to want to read more that Steve Rude has drawn. That the problem with these long continuing series is that for me it's a little hard to get into them, and sometimes the storytelling, again, as I say, for people who were there and for people who read it at a young age, there may be a nostalgia connected to it that I can't get to. So for me, I've sometimes found classic superhero comics. So if you tell me that they've worked with the big two and there are Marvel DC comics they've worked on, there are lots of Marvel and DC comics that I really love. But, I sometimes can't get into something that somebody loved from their childhood. I don't know if that makes sense. So I'd have to take a look at it, and I'd have to take a look at each separate thing individually. But that is... It's a good thing that they've got these labels over there. 1985, First Comics. But it's obviously, the story is from First Comics, but it says First Comics over here, but it's a Graffiti Designs limited edition hardcover. And now, finally, what the whole thing is about is, let's take a quick look, because I'm not going to spend an hour on every one of these issues over here, but let's take a quick look at what this stack that I have with me is all about. I think there are some... Okay, so this is from Oni Press. This is the one spine that I could see from behind. This is Whiteout. I've never read Whiteout, but again, I've heard very good things about it. This is by Greg Rucka and Steve Lieber, but something tells me that... I mean, there are lots of comics that you hear about. I think someone was talking about Whiteout in the comments of one of my videos. And as usually is the case, what happens is, when I first hear about something, or when someone makes it sound really alluring in the comments, in the chat, etc., I look that up right then, and I kind of bookmark things, or I look for things on Amazon or eBay, or my comics shop, Lone Star Comics is one of the places, and often find information, if not the comic itself. So I must have gone on the hunt, or just decided to look it up out of curiosity, and this is... again, one of those comics that probably tipped the scales because it was a signed edition. There's something about author signed editions that's like kind of my weakness. I know it's just a superficial thing, but there's just... I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. It's like anytime they do that kind of stuff to make more sales happen, I mean, they know who they're talking to. It's probably me. But I've read some Greg Rucka. I've not read a lot of Greg Rucka. I've read some Steve Lieber. I've not read a lot. But Whiteout is one that gets called out by many people as among their best works. And so therefore, I thought I would want to have an opinion on it. And this, I don't know if it's a limited edition, but it's a signed edition. I don't think... oh, yeah, it does say signed tip-in sheet. Commemorates the initial shipment of the Whiteout trade paperback collection, May 1999. So it's just that, it's a run with that one sheet inserted. Not really that big a deal, but if you're gonna get that anyway, that's a nice enough form to get it. So that's all I have to say about that, because I haven't read it yet. But yeah, if you if you want to get to me, a signed edition is usually going to do the trick. Now, what else do we have over here? I wonder if I should take them all out so I can arrange them in some sort of logical manner to present to you, or if I want to. Okay, so what I have over here is some Madman comics. We've got Madman number 6 and Madman number 7. And I think this might have been because after buying the first library edition of Madman, I enjoyed it. But then the second library edition either didn't come out for a long time, or was very expensive, or didn't come to India. And then the 6 and 7 were priced well. So this is me doing that archaeology. It's like trying to put myself back into the mindset of why I would have been buying these comics so long ago and why I wouldn't have thought of them in a while. Although, now that I think about it, I kind of knew about the Nexus. I knew that was there. But these other ones are things that I was throwing on there that were available for good prices, maybe on sale, etc. So these Madman comics, because they're 6 and 7, that pretty much makes me think that the library edition must have been 1 through 5. Tell me if I'm wrong, but here are two, and this cover, I think it is an all red cover, although it gave me some Jeff Darrow vibes. But issues 6 and 7 probably being thrown on top of the Nexus. And then what I have over here is issues 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7, not 6. I don't have issue number 6 of Wednesday Comics. Now, this I now remember is like, yes, well, Wednesday Comics were superhero comics by DC that were published. Oh, I don't know when they were published, but they'll be here. But I think what I heard about them, here we go. 2009. This is a 2009 publication, and let me show it to you first. The parchment, like, there we go. This is a very, I don't know if the camera is going to pick up how rough this is, but you should start getting a sense of it. This is like a newspaper. There's no staples on it. And now we've got the world's greatest heroes, the world's greatest comics, DC's Wednesday Comics. So this is number 1 from July 8, 2009. This is what I had heard about. I'd heard about them being modern day superhero comics done by stars of modern day comics. So this is a Batman story by Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Riso, from of many things, but obviously the 100 Bullets collaboration is what comes to mind first and foremost. But this is newspaper sized. I'm going to get rid of this tape, my bane for the evening. This is newspaper sized comics and one page stories. This is a Commandi story. It's not all going to fit over here. This is a story by Dave Gibbons. Oh dear. All right, let's see what I can do about this. I'll just have to do it this way. It's a good thing that there is this angle for us. This is issue number 1 of Wednesday Comics. That's the Azzarello Riso story. That's good. The smell of newsprint. There's the Commandi, the Last Boy on Earth, Dave Gibbons story. This is a John Arcudi and Lee Bermejo Superman story. This is a Dead Man story by Dave Bullock and Vinton Hueck. Color by Dave Stewart. That's on this side. And on the right side, you've got Kurt Busiek doing a Green Lantern story with Joe Quinone. I don't know Joe Quinone. But they all seem to be one-page stories that are somehow serialized, where it says next national security, next week into the maelstrom. So obviously trying to create this sort of retro feeling of reading a newspaper or a newspaper supplement, a comic supplement, which is all comics, and one page at a time. Metamorpho story, Neil Gaiman and Michael Allred, colored by Laura Allred. Eddie Braganza and Sean Galloway's Teen Titans story. So this is really, you can see this is the reason for it. I hope this angle is, what should I do the rest of the live stream like this? Is this a new angle that we can work with? Strange Adventures by Paul Pope, Supergirl by Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor. Wow. So it says continued next week. Is that just a gag, or do these creators continue these stories next week? Metal Men Chapter 1, Dan Didio and Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. You've got Ben Caldwell doing Wonder Woman, but this doesn't say to be continued or next week or anything like that. Wow. Sergeant Rock and Easy Company by Adam Kubert and Joe Kubert. Flash Comics by Carl Kerschel and Brendan Fletcher. Huh. So this, I'm worried now that I'm going to tear the edges, but it's such a lovely format. I can see why it would be a lot of trouble to transport and store, and but the pleasure of reading it, and especially the smell. Simonson and Steel Freeze doing a Catwoman story, a Kyle Baker Hawkman story. Wow, this is all killer. And so you've got all of these. Well, I could have just looked at here, but isn't it a real pleasure looking at it this way? It's got a collection of all the stories and the people over there, and then a robot chicken DVD thing. And so then it folds this way to become something that does look like a book. Like you see, you've got a front cover and you've got a back cover. You've got the copyright information over here. But as you see, it's a newspaper sized comic, which I think is fantastic. So that's issue number 1. I don't know how many. I guess I must have just grabbed as many as I found. And honestly speaking, when I got this package, I think one of the reasons, I knew that this is what I'd ordered, but I think that these Wednesday comics were also reprinted in smaller size. I'm not sure, but I think I read that somewhere. And then I realized that what I'd ordered was a smaller size one. So it's only now that I'm discovering that my realization was wrong, that these are actually newspaper sized and they're not the smaller sized ones. And I had gotten the right sized ones after all. I just didn't know it at the time, which is probably why I left this bag. I don't know. I'm manufacturing these reasons now. Or did I know that I had actually gotten them and I couldn't take out these big comics until I had taken care of everything. Now, this is 2A, which usually means that there was a 2B or a second pressing or a second printing, or, second impression, etc. Batman, Azzarello Risso, Kamandi Gibbons, Arcudi Bermejo Superman, Bullock Hueck Deadman, Hawkman by Baker, Busiek and Quinone Green Lantern. All right, so issue 2 definitely seems like it is continuing the stories from issue 1. So it wasn't just a gag saying next week. Gaiman Allred, Metamorpho, Briganza Galloway, Teen Titans, Paul Pope, Strange Adventures. All right, so I think if you can get a look at that, the second part, the second issue, also a newspaper-sized comic. over there. The second one is also the same story. So they are serialized, and I wonder if they're serialized all the way through. They're definitely serialized for the first two, and it's this collection of people. Let me take a look at number. What's the last one I have? Number 7. Yeah, all right. So number 7 says, yep, Batman, Azzarello, Kamandi, Gibbons, and Suk, Arcudi, Bermejo, Bullock, Hueck, Metal Men by Didio. Yep. So I guess it was those. What is it? Seven, six. Batman, Kamandi, Superman, Deadman, Metal Men, Green Lantern. So that's 5 over there, and 6 in the back. So 11. So those 11 stories that I mentioned for the first one was serialized all the way through, and you had to get all of them to get the full story to find out what happened with that Batman thing. Oh, I don't think 7 is the end of it. Is it? Maybe there's more. Oh my gosh. And I don't even have number 6. So I hope that maybe when they did the trade paperback or the smaller size one or whatever I was thinking of, I hope they put the stories together, or did they just have the chapters? If anyone can tell me more, all I knew about it is these are some fantastic team ups working on these DC comics, and it's in this format, which is what I really wanted to try out because I love these newspaper style comics. I've talked about a couple of them in the past. I've looked at a Spirit section, which was smaller than this. I've looked at, I think, the San Francisco Panorama, maybe something in the Acme Novelty Library series is like this, or one of them is. There's definitely an anthology in which you have Dan Klaus and Chris Ware and the usual suspects in that crowd. But yes, we are going. It still says to be continued and continued next week. So I'm having a sinking realization that number 7 is probably not the end of the story. How interesting. I don't know what the best way to store it is. I mean, given the way it's folded and given the way that it makes that front and back cover, it seems to be this way. But I'm almost like, I don't want the creases, but there's no way to keep it out, open. Maybe like a large, maybe like a large magazine. But no, I think, that would be the way to keep it. Actually, any recommendations on suggestions on how these Wednesday comics need to be stored? So I've got some. I've got some 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 6 issues over here. They really are lovely to touch and to smell, although not as potent as the old newspapers were. They're probably using, acid-free paper that doesn't decay. And, if it doesn't decay, then you don't get the smell, because the smell is the decay. That's the decaying paper that gives it its intoxicating bouquet. But there you have it. Everything that I've finally been able to unpack. These Wednesday comics, I think, are going to be the things that I just sort of lay back and go through. There's an armchair in the studio room now. 1, because it was a broken armchair and we had nowhere else to put it. And 2, because it muffles the audio. The more crowded and junky your room is, the better your audio will be. So I'll use that armchair and sort of stretch out with these newspaper-sized comics as my first read through this. But there is a lot to go through and a lot to appreciate. Wednesday comics are a treat art-wise, says Sleepy Reader. It definitely looks like it. Wizard Magazine has more nostalgia for me than anything else. PH Media, it's very interesting that you say that, because the Wizard Magazine is not something I grew up with, but it's something that people have talked about, and people have sent me a Wizard Magazine, and I recently received 2 copies and I haven't yet opened it. I would have made it part of this, but I thought I already have a lot to go through. But maybe in a future live stream, we can take a look at Wizard Magazine, and you can share some of your knowledge with me, which is why I wanted to do these things. People will know more about any of these things that I've shown than I will. And that's why the chat of this and the subsequent comments on this will be the real repository, because I think of this as a reverse YouTube channel. You know how YouTube channels are about experts giving you expertise? This channel is more about someone who's a non-expert getting expertise from people in the audience. And I think, there's something to be said about that approach. Madman singles, yep. Oversized Lone Wolf and Cub is something, that's the American size. I think I would love to have all of the first comics as Lone Wolf and Cub, but it's not a complete series. But then again, I've said this before, and I said this in my Lone Wolf and Cub video as well, is that it doesn't need, you don't need to read it. There is an ending. There's definitely an ending. And if you can get those last stories, you'll know how it ends. But everything in the middle can be read, I think, in almost any sequence, even though there is that larger revenge arc, and even though things do get worse, there's so much flashback and, anecdotal, whatever you want to take, that whole person on the road, that Candide, moving from scene to scene, Incredible Hulk TV show stuff, that any issues you have are good, and the story will be complete in an issue. So it would be wonderful to be able to get my hands on as many of those first single issues as I can. And if there are more first trade paperbacks, I'll take those instead of the singles as well. It's just, it's fantastic. Fantastic stuff. Is Oni Press an international publisher? I believe they're an international publisher. I mean, although I believe Oni Press, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a Canadian publisher like Drawn and Quarterly, but they must have distribution. I know that Drawn and Quarterly, I know that Fantagraphics is international distribution is Penguin Random House, just the way Marvel and DC's is Penguin Random House, and Kodansha is Penguin Random House, at least in India. But Marvel, DC, and Fantagraphics, I believe, internationally, and Drawn and Quarterly as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Oni Press was either Penguin Random House or Hachette or one of those other trade publishers, because I think everyone's in that book distribution sort of area now. So they are internationally distributed. They may not have the reach of any of these others. Somebody was talking about Vertical V wants to know, have I read the Avatar comics? Yes, I have read the Avatar comics. I've read the Avatar, I should say. I keep saying Avatar because obviously in India, that's the way we would pronounce it. But then I do realize that proper noun is a different proper noun, and they're not using a Hindi or a Sanskrit word. So even though the meaning is the same and they're using it for that reason. So anyway, yes, I have read some of them. I've read the ones that are written by Jean Luen Yang. I have purchased the Faith Erin Hicks, one of the Faith Erin Hicks stories, but I have not yet read it. This is these are great comics. The ones that I've read have been fantastic, and I'm a fan of the TV show, and I think that the TV show is sort of lightning in a bottle, but the comics do a very good job capturing the sense of that TV show. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Panels with Pete says, jumping in late since I'm solo with the kids this Saturday. Hello. Whiteout is a great read. And that's probably, I was saying that's probably the reason I picked it up, because many, many people whose opinions I respect have said that it's a great read. Does this collect both volumes of Whiteout? Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. How would I find out? Would I have to read it, perhaps? It looks so thin. I wouldn't think so. Not automatically. I think this is the first trade, and the only reason it says limited edition, what have you, is because it's celebrating. It says the Whiteout trade paperback collection. So, trade. Let me see what it contains. Issues 1 through 4. So that definitely wouldn't be first edition, May 1999. First Printed in Canada. Yeah. Oni Press is Portland, Oregon, though. It's not a Canadian publisher. It's printed in Canada, but they're from Sleepy Reader's neck of the woods. Yeah, but issues 1 through 4. So that means that this is the first volume, and that means that there is a second volume for me to get. All right, well, it's better for me to know this now than, when I'm getting to the end of the first volume. I hope it's not a cliffhanger, but maybe it will be. So just the first volume, I would assume. Let's see, what else do we have? Madman singles, yes. Wednesday Comics is a wonderful showcase for the art, Colin Taylor says. Yes, I think the size of it, there's just something about reading. I mean, well, let's put it this way. I've long subscribed to the notion that bigger is better when it comes to comics. I have more recently decided to question that automatic statement. There are certain books that I have found to really be fantastic in a small, miniaturized, even shrunken down form. And I think it all started with Raymond Briggs's Father Christmas edition. But this is, well, there's the nostalgia aspect of it, because I am old enough to have read comics in the newspaper. But even when I read new comics in the newspaper, it was never this size, because there were strips, right? And there were many of them. So something this size has been held in my hand while I read comics, but the images and the panels were rarely this size. Maybe if there were single panel comics like Marmaduke or The Family Circus or something like that. But strips, the level of detail, the fact that you can have the text be that readable while having that much room for the art, I think is really what. And when you get to something like this dense, like this Flash comic here, it's clear. I mean, I can't imagine how tiny this font would become. And if you're putting 1, 2, 3, 6 rows on a page, 6 rows on a page is just, you're pushing it. So absolutely getting the art to shine, and also getting the readability of the text up in such a way that you don't think about that as being a trade-off in order to be able to look at the art. Commercial appeal comics, not sure about that. Each issue has 1 page, Colin says, about Wednesday Comics, which run through the entire 12 issues. Oh my god, I only have 6 of them. I'm only halfway through it. No, as objects, they're fantastic, but if I can't find the other issues, so what do I have? I don't have number 6. I've got 1 through 7, but not 6. So I need 6, and then I need 8 through 12. Now, if that doesn't happen, I'm going to have to find another way to read these stories. So I'm hoping there's a trade or something out there if I start enjoying the stories a lot. However, that does mean that all of them are essentially 12-page stories. So it's funny that you would have this huge run and all this paper, but because of the number of stories you have, you actually end up with very quick, half an issue or less size stories from each creator. Matt Ginger says, I love spelling books. I do too. I think there is a video of mine from many years ago called How I Repair My Comics and Why I Repair My Comics, because for some people it's, collectors, blah. But my thing is, I can't, ever put them in CGC. I can't ever just put them into a portfolio in a way. I've got to be able to touch them, and I've got to be able to smell them. And I think over there, I've gotten a couple of comments going, this guy is smelling his comics. Yes, this is weird or something. I'm like, I don't think you've done it. You wouldn't think it was weird because the smell of books, the decay of the paper, as I was saying, is such a big part of their charm. They were all reprinted in oversized hardcover, but not newspaper full size. Oh, okay. So there is a hardcover that's larger than your regular trade paperback size, or so bigger than a hardcover normally is, or like say a deluxe edition or something like that, but smaller but bigger than the standard comics. Okay. All right. So at least that's one way. If you can track down that hardcover, that's one way you can read the whole stories if you can't get every issue. Although some of these pages, I was saying, like especially that Flash thing that we were looking at, that would get pretty dense. So it would have to be a little oversized at least, I think. 12 issues, hardcover collecting it. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Very kind of you to say. Live streams are all about interaction. There are experts on YouTube. Of course, there are experts on YouTube. And if you don't believe it, Comic Crack, they'll let you know that they are. There's there's all kinds. But YouTube is a universe. It's hard to typify it as any one thing. Have I ever purchased anything from the Fantagraphics website from India? No, never from India. I have purchased things from the Fantagraphics website while I was visiting my sister in the US and had it shipped to her address, and that was great. There was no problems over there. I've taken advantage of their sales, and then they have this thing called the Fanta Bucks sales where every dollar you spend gets you another dollar, so it's essentially a buy one get one, and you can bank those dollars for buying things later, etc. And so I have purchased from them, and I've purchased a t-shirt from them. So I've purchased comics, and they're one of the few places that has gotten any money for merchandise from me. I'm not a big merch person. I like t-shirts, I guess. That's one thing that I will wear and will use. So that's the only type of merch I indulge in. Although I do have, again, there's in one of my videos, this is another one of those quiz questions, like, which was the first video in which I revealed my name? Is like, which is my favorite piece of comics merch? And oddly enough, it's from Fantagraphics. It's not a t-shirt though. I'll give the answer to this one. It's a Little Nemo rubber stamp. It's a rubber stamp, just like you dip it into ink or whatever, on a stamp pad, and it creates a beautiful, perfect little, Winsor McKay panel. And there's something about that stamp making it feel, and that artwork making it, the artwork looks like an old newspaper, because that's how a stamp looks. So it's a perfect match of what it is as an item and what it's doing. It's beautiful. I mean, like, the first time I saw it, I was like, I have to have this, and I never feel that way, really. I mean, okay, I feel that way plenty, but the feeling passes. That one, it didn't pass, so I did pick it up. So, but Fantagraphics website in India, I don't know. I don't trust. There's one thing. Okay, so here is a piece of what do they call it? A PSA. Here's a public service announcement. When shipping things to India, do not use FedEx at all. It's borderline scam artistry over here. They're ridiculous. You just send it USPS, and the good old Indian post office system and USPS will work fine. Yeah, there are people who use FedEx because they want to save me money, and it ends up costing me a lot of money. Like the last time Fantagraphics sent me something, and I never got this book. I have not been able to collect it yet. They sent me the new Jaime Hernandez book, and it cost me 120 rupees, which is, less than $2. So fine in duty, because it's a free gift. But they tacked on about $100 worth of charges on it, including saying that they needed my ID. So I had to upload my ID, which was a royal pain and a different thing. And I had to upload my ID for customs clearance, even though it's not supposed to drop. It doesn't matter. They charged me for processing my ID. It's ridiculous. It's like the most, and like, then I was trying to talk to them about something, and then they were saying that, well, you've got to have this clearance. And I said, but I got this clearance a month ago for another thing that they had sent me. Why do you need it again? And they're not supposed to ask you for this again. But they charged me for processing out of that, and they charged me tax on it. It was like, honestly, it was something out of Terry Gilliam's Brazil at one point of time. So I don't know what Fantagraphics or any other publisher uses, but if anyone uses FedEx in India, it's going to be a nightmare. So check with them about that first. Netflix show Pressure. What is this? Oh, I must have missed something. We owe Kodansha so much in the West. Yeah, Kodansha is great, and I think Kodansha in India is doing really well, as is Viz. I think I've seen some sales numbers, and they're very good. They're very good. I think it's brilliant. I think their pricing is very good as well, which is the thing that people have to keep in mind about India. Oh, the Eternaut. Yes. Yeah, the Eternaut is something else. It's great. I have not seen the new Netflix TV show. I guess I should get to that. But sometimes like people ask me sometimes, are you excited about the new Usagi TV show? Are you excited about that movie? I'm like, I guess I'll watch it if people say it's good, but I don't automatically have an excitement about something being adapted into another medium. I'd much rather see something that is good and original than something that adapts something, and then I'm going to have all of these different hang-ups because it's difficult to capture what makes it so special. But if anyone tells me that the Eternaut is good, then that will make it more likely for me to watch it because I'll say, okay, someone who's read the comic and really appreciates the comic can appreciate this. But I'll wait and see. The collection is coming back into print. The collection of, I'm not sure which one we're talking about. Maybe that's the Eternaut. Yeah, I think I read that Fantagraphics is reprinting the Eternaut. Again, I think they reprint the Eternaut once every 10 years. Even the last time I bought it, I had to wait because I think they originally published it in 2015 and it became out of print in less than a year. And then I had to wait, 7 years in order to get the reprint and buy a pirated copy before and then send back the pirated copy because it was unreadable. That's another nonsense. The Love and Rockets hip flask, Ashwita, to correcting me that's not my only piece of comics merch. Yes, I do have a Love and Rockets hip flask. It's funny that all of my merch is Fantagraphics, but the Love and Rockets hip flask, I do not believe is official merch. I believe it's just somebody doing some, Etsy kind of stuff. I think it's copyright violation because, well, that's just the sense I got. I bought it off of eBay because it's a hip flask with the first issue's cover on it. Oh, and I have a video in which that is shown as well. That's my video about my tiger safari. So that's the one about Love the Tiger. And when we went on, we went to a national park to try and see if we could spot a tiger. So I took Love the Tiger, which is set in India, with me, and I made a video on that. So I took Love and I took Love and Rocket. So I took that with some whiskey in it. So yes, I have the Little Nemo stamp, a Love and Rockets t-shirt, and a Love and Rockets hip flask. Those are that's all the comics merchandise I have. It's becoming like Steve Martin in The Jerk, and this is all I have, and this is all I have. Yeah, customs in Argentina is bad as well. It's terrible, and this is not just a customs thing. Once again, this thing is a FedEx thing. The customs was 120 rupees. The FedEx fees, including a warehousing fee for keeping it because they were waiting for me to give my documents, which they already had. All of that was over $100 for something that cost $2 in customs fees. I cannot stress this enough of what a scam this is. What if this was medicine? What if this was something that people really needed or something? They think they're dealing with importers and exporters and they can hold these things to hostage. It's really, I talk to people who send me this and they say, we use FedEx so that the people receiving these goods don't have to pay any money for it. So that makes it even worse. Like the reason they are using it is so that they can they'll say, you will take care of you'll take care of the fees or you'll take care of this kind of stuff. I don't know what kind of scam they're running over here, but it's terrible. It's terrible. The Wednesday Comics collection is being reprinted again, Sam. All right, I'll keep my eye out for it because I have my doubts about being able to source all 12 of these issues. And because of Netflix, the Eternaut is getting multiple printings in several countries. Yeah, I can imagine. I would have thought, maybe this is just me, but I would have thought that you reprint it before the show comes out. And so therefore it's available to buy, day and date when people get excited about it. I think you start a reprint process. I guess it's a Netflix show, so it'll always be on Netflix. But I always think that the whole point was to be, to have the tie-in thing coming out the way that they used to do it in video games before video game development started being taken seriously. It's like you have it out because the interest is only going to last that long. I'm particularly surprised whenever I hear that someone's going for a reprint now. Surely you could have tried to engineer it. Of course, this is maybe me being very foolish and not understanding the complexities of these situations, which is quite possible. But anyway, I think we are up at the 1 hour 43 minute mark with a very nice relaxed pace. I think this is a good one. I think we're not at 2 hours, so we'll consider it one of the shorter live streams, but I had a great time. going through these comics and these packages with all of you. I've got some great reading material over here, but I'm also going to go through all of the comments and the chats later to see if I missed anything, which is something I do when the chats sort of load up. So the recorded version always has these. Leave your comments if you're watching this later on any of these things, whatever. I read all the comments that people write. I try to respond to all of the comments as well, but I even go back through live stream chats because sometimes it's going by fast or I've gotten distracted. There were some times when I wasn't wearing my glasses, so I couldn't really see what I was looking at, but I do go back over them in order to get myself more knowledgeable about things. So put all of it in the comments. Tell me what you think about these. Tell me what else I should be looking out for. And as another reminder, if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you hit that like button because of this scientific experiment that I'm conducting to say that if I mention it, do I change the numbers from what I've observed over the last, whatever, 5 or 6 years. So now that I have that bigger data set, if I ask you to hit the like button, will I get more likes on this live stream than I usually do, which is a pathetic number of likes. I appreciate every single one of them, but the relative comparison, say, per 500 views, it's like, it's bizarre. It's so bizarrely different. It's like, why? Is it just that people don't like the live streams? That doesn't seem to be the case as far as the other stats are concerned. So hit like and give me more fuel for this experiment, if you don't mind. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for watching. This has been For the Love of Comics, and I'll see you in the next video.